The Shining is written and directed by Stanley Kubrick. It's based off the novel by Stephen King. It came out in 1980. It stars Jack Nicholson, Shelley Duvall, and Danny Lloyd. And it is my favourite horror film ever. And yes, I know, my mic quality is flippin' horrendous. I will hopefully fix it by next video, whenever that is. But what actually makes The Shining so good? Why do I love it so much as a horror film? Well, for a start, the name Stanley Kubrick means a lot to me. It's very, very, very well directed. I think a lot of the ways that the camera moves in this makes you feel very compact and very small feeling. You feel like many of the characters do as a slave to this massive place, and that's in part due to the direction and cinematography, which again, just like in 2001: A Space Odyssey, is very symmetrical, very tight feeling, very intentional. And I think it's also due to the set design and the production design. It's very interesting actually how the maze outside of the hotel and the hotel itself are very similar in layout, and I think that was completely intentional. And that is basically a comment on what this place is. It's a maze. In addition to that, I want to talk about the music, which builds some brilliant tension through it. Through the opening credits alone, you can just tell what kind of film you're in for. You're in for a character-based horror thriller, a psychological nightmare, and the music helps this occur brilliantly. The editing as well is very unique for the time. Most horror films were very sporadic in terms of their editing, as in normally they would be very conventional in terms of the imagery and the shot composition. This film is very abstract in the way it's told. Most horror films, and horror directors in particular, would aim to make it look as terrifying and as sporadic as possible to increase that element of fear. So seeing this Kubrick-esque symmetry and order to everything makes it much more chilling. Is this real? The film utilizes what many people like to call a biased narrator. What we're seeing is bias. We can't tell if it's what the characters are seeing or objectively what is being seen. And that's another thing I find fascinating. It's very much open to interpretation. However, if you're not into all that, that's fine. It's a very well-made horror film beyond that. I always hate how all the camera work in these movies is so very wild feeling and completely intentionally, and I completely understand it. But something about how still and muted the whole thing feels is kind of frightening. Like I said, the lighting and the framing in this is so unsettling because it's treated like it's completely normal. It's treated like it's objective, when in reality we don't know whether what we're seeing is real or not. The tension in this film is built through this, as we're unsure what we're actually seeing, and the film treats it as if it's normal. There are no real editing techniques they use. They just make it look as deliberate as possible. They make it look like everything we're seeing is normal, but of course we know that that isn't true. Let's then get into the characters. A lot of these characters have actually been changed from their original novel debut, and to be perfectly honest, I think that they kind of had to be changed. In the novel, there are certain things that can be explained that you just can't tell suitably in a film, in the same way that adapting every line of a book just doesn't work in a movie. Thankfully, however, I think Kubrick more than made up for this. The characters at first glance are very everyday, very average, and you don't really know why you follow them. You have a weird kid, a feeble mother, and a basically useless writer. However, as the film progresses, you start to realize that their characters get changed throughout this. Horror films so often leave their character arcs blatantly just to, oh, they go mad, or oh, they go strong enough to defeat the baddie. In this, there are 3 main characters, all of which go through arcs, and I find the way that they deal with these arcs fascinating. The writing itself, it's very methodical, it's very slow, it's very precise, it's intentional. It well paces all of the scares without feeling incredibly forced or mandated. Over time, the character changes definitely feel gradual, and whilst I wouldn't say they were exactly earned, they definitely don't feel out of place when major parts occur. And that's where I want to get into the type of horror here. Horror is something that I find to be extremely frustrating. People have very low expectations for horror films, and it infuriates me with what they've become. This film contains not a single jump scare, not a single loud noise or thing. Horror films are mostly composed of rules, and the thing I can say is that the rule of this hotel is that it can change you, but it can't harm you. The only things that can harm you are the people within it, and that I find to be the scariest part. It's not the hotel itself that's scary, or any of the spirits that haunt it. It's the people and the unsettling nature of them that are truly terrifying in this film. The film essentially leaves the main villain of itself up to your interpretation. A large number of the elements are all up to your decision, and because of this open-endedness, I think it makes the film even more unsettling, because a bad horror film attempts to shock you every 5 minutes. A good horror film attempts to scare you as the film progresses. And a great horror film unsettles you throughout and crescendos at the very end. I think this film probably has some of the most iconic horror scenes perhaps ever in it, and that's due to a use of very good imagery, a very great mix of editing and music and production design and acting, and surprisingly, even Danny Lloyd, who was about 9 years old when they filmed this, he's fantastic. He's amazing in this film. All the performances are excellent, and you know, the weak link I would say is Shelley Duvall, but even then, she's really good. For what the character is, it makes perfect sense, and Kubrick especially pushed her to be as terrified as possible on set. Say as you will about the nature there, but it paid off. And of course, Jack Nicholson is effortlessly great. I think what a lot of people try to attribute to The Shining is that there are certain messages. They say things like the moon landing was faked, or that it's anti-communist, but I think in the end what the message actually is that people are the ultimate villains in this story. It isn't a hotel that tries to kill them, or a spirit that tries to kill them. At the end of the day, what it is that tries to kill them and ruin their lives are the people. Sure, there are supernatural elements in there and some strange things they see, but for the most part, the only harm that comes to any character is from themselves. There are nice people in this that you could definitely relate to, and that's the goal of a lot of this film. It scares us mostly towards the second half, but that's because the first half has a goal of making you connect to these characters and understand the arcs they go through. And that's all I'll really say. I don't think you can really attribute that much meaning to The Shining. Don't get me wrong, it's a fantastic film, but I think giving it this much weight isn't the way to go. But anyway, with my conclusion on The Shining, well, you know what I'm going to say about it. The direction is flawless, The cinematography is excellent, the production design is stellar, the acting is amazing, the writing and tension is built flawlessly, and the type of horror that's shown here is legitimately terrifying and really unsettling. This is the sort of horror film that demands that you think in the middle of it. It demands that you feel a real sense of uncertainty. It requires that you think and pay attention to what you're seeing. And of course, I am going to give The Shining a 10 out of 10. And that's all I'll say on The Shining. Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't the only good horror film out there. There are a number of other great ones, but I thought since it's Halloween that I would have to review at least one of my favourite horror films, and so of course I went for The Shining, my personal favourite, and one that I think there needs to be a lot of talking about. And so with that, I'll thank you for watching this video. I hope to upload more often on this channel, and if you guys enjoy this video, be sure to subscribe, like and comment, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.